Welcome to Be Your Own Advocate. I'm here today with Isaiah Fliessbach, my co-host, and we have a really interesting discussion today, and it has to do with feet and how important they are to health at every stage, and how sometimes and somehow we just seem to take them for granted, and we don't recognize them as a big part of health, of balance, of strength, of movement, of confidence, just so many aspects. So today we have a special guest, Dr. Jack Zuckerman. He has a phenomenal physical therapy center here in Northeast New Jersey. And I have found him to be an incredible advocate for people as far as understanding how to get better, where their injury came from, and how to strengthen it. So I'd like to welcome him at this time, Dr. Jack Zuckerman. Hello. So thank you for being here today, to being on Be Your Own Advocate. And I was just saying how the discussion of feet and how people don't even think about them. They take them for granted, but how incredibly important they are for strength, for balance, for healthy aging, for connectivity, so many aspects. And I discovered that, or became more aware of it as far as being a patient at Total Recovery, and the amazing way that you worked back to where I had stronger balance, my ankles were stronger, I walk with more confidence. How, it definitely had the physical and the emotional and the mental aspects to it, but it's something that people don't even think about. Like, I can make my feet stronger. They just feel like, oh, I'm older, or I'm working, or I'm walking too much, so my feet hurt, and they leave it there.
Hmm.
And I wanted to talk to you and find out more about, like, do you think that a lot of dysfunction in the body starts in the feet?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. The feet are definitely part of the foundation of our body. If you just think about the feet and ankles, we have 33 joints in the foot and ankle. We have 29 muscles, a lot going on, lots of mechanoreceptors that are essentially giving us a lot of sensory awareness and feedback of what's going on. So if your foundation or part of your foundation is off, that's going to create a trickling effect all the way up the chain, and it's going to create lots of compensations. Those compensations will cause further dysfunctions and problems and ailments, whether it's aches and pains, imbalances, so on and so forth. So, uh, for sure, we want to know what's going on in the feet. We want to correct those things because it will cause problems down the line. But I do want to be very clear as well that dysfunction, it's not only just the feet. It's really it's a feedback mechanism, right? Because your feet tell you where you are in space. Um, so it starts in the feet, but also it dives a little bit deeper into how the rest of the body is organized. So it goes into the pelvis, it goes into the rib cage. What's the
Mhm.
diaphragm doing as a not only as a breathing muscle as we know, but also what is it doing as a stabilizing muscle, as a core muscle, because it truly is a core muscle. So, but all of it interconnects. All of it has a connection. So it's not nothing works independently in the body. There's with this thing. There's a concept called regional interdependence, where there are things they're separated, but they're connected. And how are they connected? Well, really two ways. The nervous system. The nervous system is one unit, and the myofascial system, which is connecting the entire body from head to toe. And through those mechanisms is how the feet and the rest of the body integrate. But it does start from the feet because that is where we get all that sensory feedback. That is again loaded with mechanoreceptors that are telling our brain what's going on, what we're feeling, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Um, Isaiah does a lot of body work as well. So we've been talking about this topic pretty intensely for a while, especially because of my own experience. And I realized that if that that I wasn't even going to address it, except that, one of the problem in one of my feet. But, once I addressed it, I realized, what a big difference it makes, and how people they don't think of it like that. Feet are feet, they just, you use them, but the amount of adhesion that was in my feet, like, I think a lifetime of walking, and for me, heels, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's not only not only adhesions, but we got to think about the civil, where how we live. We live in shoes and hard shoes and boots and all that, and we rarely make contact with the ground, right? Maybe if you're
Yep.
at home, and even then at home, people are wearing slippers and different types of Crocs and whatever, whatever they're wearing. So with all the that sensory input we're talking about and all the joints that we have, we're casting our feet. We're putting cast on our feet. And what do we know about a cast? You put a cast over anything and you mobilize it, it's not going to move. It's going to stiffen up. You're going to lose strength. You're going to lose range of
Stiffen up.
motion, mobility, feedback, sensory feedback, all that good stuff. So we're constantly doing that. If you just look at, something I give this example of, look at third world countries. They don't have the, musculoskeletal issues that we have. They have other issues, of course, but a lot of the musculoskeletal issues and pains and aches and all these dysfunctions and adhesions and they don't really have because they're not sitting in a chair all the time. They are a little bit more barefoot, connecting and grounding from a holistic perspective, like being able to walk barefoot on dirt, grass, sand, what have you. And that creates more of that sensory feedback. It gets those muscles and joints to move where you typically don't. And that's how adhesions start to develop. Right? When you don't
Yeah.
use it, you lose it. It's that common, phrase we've heard for, we always, and it's very true. If you don't use a joint, if you don't use muscles, you're going to lose connection with it. And then when you start losing connection, we talked about compensations, but also adhesions. Things don't move. Your body needs movement. If you don't have the movement, then nothing is getting, there's no blood flow, there's lack of blood flow, there's
Mhm.
lack of fluid moving, and then things start to get restricted, and then you start to develop adhesions.
Mhm.
And then you got to work backwards and start to remove all that stuff and reintegrate
Mhm.
movement again, and then use neuromuscular reeducation, certain movement techniques and patterns to reintegrate normal movement so your brain kind of remembers, like, oh, yeah, we call it muscle memory, right? And that's basically what it is. Like, we once had that movement when we were a child, but we lost it just
Mhm.
wearing improper shoe wear. Obviously, we can't be walking around barefoot. No one's expecting that, day in, day out, but try to be more barefoot, throughout the times when you have the opportunity. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer. If you have issues, you should not be going barefoot because you're going to hurt yourself, right? So the whole barefoot craze of barefoot running, um, that's great and all, but if you've never done it and then you say, "Oh, I'm gonna go get some barefoot shoes and go start running on concrete for the next 10 miles," you're gonna be in a lot of pain. You're gonna cause some serious problems, stress fractures, tendonitis issues. You have to build up to that. People who do that and are good with that and don't have developing issues, that's because they've been doing it for years. So even though barefoot and training, and we do that a lot in our clinic, getting patients barefoot and doing balance training barefoot, exercises barefoot. It's wonderful, but we do it in very short bouts and we do it in a controlled environment so the patient knows what's good and what's not. We're not telling the general population, hey, the best thing for you to do is do barefoot. And that's what happens with a lot of injuries. You look at Instagram, YouTube, Google, and they're like, oh, barefoot is the trend. You got to go barefoot. And then you have a wave of injuries that are, very much preventable, but you have to be smart about it. And you have to know how to integrate that kind of movement. And then that's how you're going to develop proper movement and stability and balance in your body. And essentially, that's how you'll be able to start to turn the lights back on in regards to getting that nervous system to start working again. So absolutely, it's all those things that occur, calcifications, adhesions, tension, just lack of movement, lack of being and a big of it is lack of movement and just being stuck in hard-soled shoes, boots,
Mhm.
work shoes. It's just the culture and where we live in nowadays.
Yeah. Isaiah, I know you had some questions.
I mean, everything you just said brings up a lot of questions. I have so much to say about that, but just the loss of articulation of the
Hmm.
foot and what that leads to in the brain, upstream problems, and then there's this referral back and forth.
Hmm.
One thing I want to address right away, you said mechanoreceptors. I think a lot of people don't know what that is, so I'd like to just give me like a little, if you would, a little simple understanding of mechanoreceptors and how what that means. What are the receptors within the body in your experience, and how does that play out for people on a regular daily basis?
Yeah, there are a number of receptors in your body. They recept like even things like temperature, like it tells your body like is it hot or cold, right? If you touch a hot stove, it's like, ooh, that's hot. Well, there's a receptor that tells you that it's hot and tells your brain, hey, move your hand away or you're gonna get burned. Then you have other receptors that give you an idea of proprioception, like where you are in place. So if I close my eyes and you lift my arm up over my head, I don't have to see that my arm is up. I know my arm is up because I have these mechanoreceptors that tell me exactly where my arm is in place. We call that proprioception, right? Knowing where we are in place. So with the feet, there's feet and hands. There's a ton of mechanoreceptors that are telling us feedback of what's going on, right? So what are we feeling in our hands? There's a ton of them as well. Like if you feel a texture, you can know if everything is intact and everything's working and there's no injuries, you can tell exactly texture, temperature, anything like that. With the feet, the same exact way. But those mechanoreceptors in your feet are telling us where we are in place. How much, are we putting more weight on the inside of our foot, on the outside of our foot? And these receptors are essentially little guide wires or antennas that are telling our body or our brain specifically what's happening in our body, what's going on, and giving us that feedback. And it's a constant feedback. It's a closed loop system where if there's something off, the brain is going to tell the body and the muscles to respond, right?
Yeah.
So just the example I gave with a hot stove, it's like, oh, that's hot. Let me pull my arm back away so I don't burn myself and suffer any kind of severe injuries. That's a
Right.
very, very quick response that happens within milliseconds, right? Under normal conditions, obviously, as long as no one's having any kind of injuries or anything like that, or any other cognitive or brain issues. But yeah, those mechanoreceptors is a big part of it. And again, we lose a lot of that sensory awareness, those
Yeah.
because if you don't use it, you lose it, and that's as simple as it is.
Yeah, the body's so good at adapting and compensating, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't want to, but it's really,
Very
really
good.
evolved to do that, right? Quickly.
Humans, especially athletes, are the biggest cheaters because we're able to compensate and move in ways that we shouldn't, but we will, especially athletes. They've developed how to, that's why you see all these injuries with athletes because they've developed a way to cheat and be able to compensate and move through a certain thing, even if they're not really they shouldn't be doing that, and that's how the injuries happen. And human beings in general, same thing. It's like, hey, we still continue need to move our body or lift our arms over the head, even though there's dysfunction in the shoulder. We're able to compensate. So loaded with compensations. Our body is loaded with compensations, for
Love
sure.
it. And then curious a little bit about like fascia and fascial relationship
Mhm.
from the feet up, and your experience around that. And I think of fascia being the biggest proprioceptive organ. I believe they've determined that. I used to think it was the human eye, but your ability to sense yourself in space and have a body map that's clear and understand how you are posturally oriented is really determined by the fascia in big part. And makes me also think of like two things. One, when you get new tires on your car, it's really obvious in the moment. Like, of course, this is the ground contact. This is a big deal. And new tires make it feel so different when you're driving, you know?
Yeah.
And then, for example, going to the beach, going to Hawaii, flying, just being barefoot on the beach, how much is, the air, the fact that you're not working, and how much is really just that you have a different relationship with the ground. Maybe you're barefoot, maybe you've got more electromagnetic transference happening. There's a lot more powerful reorientation and health effects from such a simple thing that we often overlook that. So it's cool to just discuss it and talk about it and make it applicable. Like I see people, thousands of people, and it's rare that someone doesn't have like really strong psychological, emotional issues, physical pain, and then have really open feet. Like it's usually they correlate. There's like a foot blockiness, like you said, a boot that correlates with this other tension in the body. And I don't know what's primary. Each person's different, but it's definitely tied in.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like ancient Chinese medicine, I mean, they everything there, all the different points in your feet have some kind of connection into your kind of gut health and what's going on with all your organs. I forget the name of it, but they have reflexology, right? That's a big part of it. So, and part of that is how the rest of the body connects. So all the points in your body and in your feet connect to some kind of organs in your body. And all right, we have acupuncturists that are on staff in our clinic. They know a lot more about that and how the feet integrate with the rest of the body. But I hear it all the time when I'm referring a patient now to for acupuncture, and they're having, let's say, low back pain. They're putting needles in their feet. It's like,
Yeah.
Right.
well, what connection is there? Like, let's that has to make, and they go through explanation of how there are connections, and it's these meridian pathways, and a lot of those meridian pathways are just like the pathways of the nerves and the fascial system, and how that integrates, because they kind of follow a very similar path line. and then how that all integrates and creates more awareness and all that. So acupuncture is a big staple of our practice, and we constantly all the time our acupuncturists constantly use different points in the lower legs and feet to get other ailments fixed essentially in the body. So yeah, there's definitely a big connection there for sure.
Me
They've been
too.
doing it for thousands of years.
I feel like that, like the palm of the foot, right in the center of the foot, there's kidney one.
Hmm.
Kidney, deepest organ in the body.
Exactly.
For example, people have a hard time falling asleep and
Hmm.
sleep issues. Got to open that kidney. Got to get the ground, the electromagnetic pathway open through your foot, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
the top point of the ankle, right? There's a hollow right at the top of your ankle where the ankle, the front of your ankle, where the leg bone meets the foot, and that's stomach one. So
Yep.
traditionally in Chinese medicine, you just walk uphill gently for 5-10 minutes after you're eating your meal, and it keeps stimulating that stomach to break it down and move it through and reduce the sense of fullness and open up your digestive system.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty cool to look at uh, these ancient understandings of the body, and then it becomes so obvious in our everyday lives, and the importance
Absolutely.
of maintaining circulatory flow, blood, energy, lymph through those tissues is
Hmm.
absolutely essential. And we can deny it and call it woo woo all we want, but we're going to suffer eventually by not paying attention to it. So, got to
100%.
open the feet as well as all these tissues.
Yeah.
What do you find is, I'm just curious about your practice. You have a lot of people. It sounds like you have a big clinic. You go
Big
through,
clinic.
like, could you just talk a little bit about like what's the stickiest types of conditions you face, and what do you find really good success with people in terms of, say, pain or dysfunction? Love to just know a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, I'll tell you the most challenging one that we've had as generally as physical therapists that we learn about, and then we come out of school and we try to treat and we don't have much success. And then we've definitely integrated a lot. It's not so much musculoskeletal kind of is, but the one condition I would say is neuropathy. So patients suffer from
Right.
neuropathy. That's a tough one because, well, the number one reason people get neuropathy, more than 50% of peripheral neuropathy cases are from diabetic neuropathy, so diabetes. So that's an underlying issue that has to be controlled internally, whether it's holistically, Western medicine, however you need to control your blood glucose levels, right? That's understandable. But once it gets out of control and you start developing the later stages of symptoms of neuropathy, numbness, tingling in your feet, burning, whatever, it's mostly in your feet or your hands. That's where it starts first. That and then there's other conditions as well. There's chemo-induced and autoimmune dysfunctions. There's antibiotics you could take that can cause that. And a lot of cases are idiopathic. Their diagnosis is idiopathic, meaning unknown cause. Like you'll go to a doctor and it's like, hey, why do you have neuropathy? We don't know. A lot of those cases actually fall right into our wheelhouse because they're musculoskeletal. And they usually fall in something like, hey, there's a compression of a nerve somewhere. Say the most simple case, like sciatica. It's like, hey, your sciatic nerve is being compressed somewhere along the line between your lower back, hips, somewhere it's being compressed, and it's causing that symptoms of numbness, tingling, burning. Because anything touching or affecting nerves will recreate those symptoms. But it's not necessarily, peripheral neuropathy. Neuropathy just means nerve, right? Neuro, and pathy just means some kind of state of disease or dysfunction. So nerves are being obviously affected based on the symptoms, but why? And so neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy specifically, is something that we've really tackled in the last couple of years. We dive deep into the research, and we were just looking to see what's the research out there and what are the leading experts, like who's doing what, and in a very more non-invasive way. So we're not talking about medications, we're not talking about injections, we're not talking about surgery. We're talking about what is a way to treat patients from a very conservative way, cost-efficient way. And we've created a neuropathy program now. We have workshops almost every month where patients come in. We promote program online and through different ads, and people come in and they learn about what kind of neuropathy they possibly have, and what are some of the reasons, and then what's successful treatment look like. And one of the things that we've, like I said, when we came out of school, what can you do for neuropathy? Just some little movement, stretching, strengthening, just stimulate some blood flow. Because in most neuropathy cases, lack of blood flow. There's not enough blood flow, not enough oxygenation. Your nerves are kind of screaming for more blood flow, more oxygen. They're not getting, your brain doesn't like it, and it creates the symptoms. And if that goes untreated, then you start developing other issues such as loss of balance and loss of sensation and strength issues, and then it's a whole cascade of events there. But so the idea there is that number one, you want to find out what the root cause is and then treat the root cause, but also restore more blood flow. And how do we do that? Well, we talked about acupuncture. Acupuncture works really well with that. And not only that they are able to restore more blood flow to the peripheral nerves in your hands and feet, but they can actually help treat the diabetes, the underlying condition, right? Whether it's pancreatic function, blood glucose levels. And then obviously if there is a something we have to work a little bit externally with maybe a dietitian that we work with, get a dietitian, nutritionist in to make sure that their diet is well balanced, that they're not adding more to their diet that's maybe contributing to more of their blood glucose levels. Maybe
Mhm.
work with their physician depending on what medications they're on. But the symptoms are still there. So now we got to treat the symptoms. How do we do that? Well, we got to regenerate the nerves. So acupuncture, we talked about one. We have another device called deep tissue laser therapy. This is a very powerful infrared light device. It's funny that some patients goes like, "Oh yeah, I have one of those," and I'm like, "Oh, you do?" It's like, "Oh, tell me a little bit about it." Yeah, I got it on Amazon for like $500. I'm like, "Oh, okay." Well, the device that we have is $50,000. It's a little bit different. It works a little bit different in the science. There's tons of research on it. And specifically, the research is called photobiomodulation. That's what it uses. The science is called photobiomodulation, and essentially, it's a fancy word of stimulating the mitochondria in the cells, the
Mhm.
powerhouse of the cell, to try and regenerate and get the tissues to start to improve their cellular metabolism, healing, and essentially bring in more blood flow and all the nutrients that needed to start regenerating those nerves. So deep tissue laser therapy, infrared light, that's one thing that we use. The second thing we use that's a little bit newer to our practice, but it's been huge. It's called the New Fit New B. That's an electrical device using direct current. Very, very different than your traditional electrical stimulation you find in most PT practices, which uses alternating current. Very, very different science, very different way it communicates and heals the nerves because your nervous system works off of direct current. Right? The signals that your nervous system sends use direct current. Alternating current just works on the surface. Works on just directly putting a little bit of feedback on the surface, but it doesn't work on the closed loop system. So when we use this device, this electrical current device, it helps stimulate the nerves, but it also helps re-educate the muscles and nerves and the brain to create that reconnection. So the Newbie device, deep tissue laser therapy, acupuncture, and then of course there are the traditional sense of physical therapy where we integrate specific exercises, specific movements, whether we take them on exercises on different surfaces. We have a sensory mat where we get patients to walk on the sensory mat, do balance activities, especially if there's a balance issue. And this combination of treatments is what we've gotten a lot of success over the past year, where I would say probably we went from maybe 25% success rate to getting our patients better with neuropathy. We're close to about 90%. So 90%
Wow.
of patients actually improve with our neuropathy program. And again, if it's a chronic condition like diabetic neuropathy, if you have severe diabetic neuropathy or you have diabetes, it's one of those things you have to maintain. But if you can maintain it and you need to do a course of treatment a couple of times a year, and that's going to help improve your function and your quality of life, and you're going to be able to sleep with no pain, it's way better than taking metformin or gabapentin, which is really not doing anything except masking your symptoms. So we've came up with this solution. It's been working really well. Some people recover completely, especially with like chemo-induced neuropathy or some kind of autoimmune or maybe antibiotic induced. They recover completely. But for diabetic neuropathy, just depending on what stage they're in, and we've been very, very successful. So neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy is definitely one of those really challenging ones, and no one really has an answer for it. And we've been very successful in coming up with an answer and come up with a program.
Well, there is an answer, right? And you're alluding to it. People, we go to the doctor, we go to Western medicine, which I'm super grateful that we have medical centers all over the place for acute treatment. But the reality is they cannot help you with what you're talking about because they're not trained to. When
Yeah.
I went, when I looked at medical schools and started looking into being a doctor, I realized the whole syllabus in the majority of these high-level medical schools, Stanford, wherever, not a single thing about health in there. And it was such an eye-opener for me. I'm like, wait a minute, they don't study health. So it was like, it just, there are doctors that do, but the system's not set up to really serve us. You can't get what you're talking about in 10 minutes with some palpation and a little bit of prescription or surgery or medication. It doesn't work that way.
Oh,
So I think that what you're saying is like this is some of the most important stuff we could discuss as humans, in my opinion, right? It's about quality of life, quality of connection, brain health, circulation, right? This is it. This is where it's really where our quality of life really improves is by addressing these things and finding people that can coach us through that and give us tools and get us back online. Um, and I love that you're addressing the blood sugar issue and insulin resistance because we have type 3 diabetes now, dementia, Alzheimer's, brain disorders. Like who out there is not facing some ill effect either in themselves or their loved ones or their family?
Mhm.
Sugar, inability to balance blood sugar, and the diet that doesn't support that. So you're addressing all the right stuff. Neuropathy is definitely something that I see is difficult to deal with. A lot of people can't find answers to, and they just suffer. So thank you for bringing that up, and excited to be able to give you and potentially if you have references on the West Coast to share resources of people that do similar things as you do with our viewers and other people. And
Yeah, we definitely have. There are clinics. I'm part of a lot of different communities with private practice owners, essentially all across the country. I know tons of private practice owners because we are in it's a pretty physical therapy private practice owners are a pretty tight community because we all have one goal, is to get people better naturally. We want to help people with their musculoskeletal needs, and so we are a pretty tight niche community where, we have a lot of barriers. Healthcare system is not great. We're not looked at as the first line of defense. We're kind of at the bottom, when it comes to like, hey, what should we do about this pain? Well, it's like they think about physical therapy way later in the stages. It's like, oh, let's try this, and that first, where it should be the opposite. We call that flipping the pyramid and the healthcare pyramid. We've done it before with the food chain pyramid, where we now understand what's, our macronutrients and what's important, what's not. And it's like, okay, before it's like, hey, yeah, carbohydrates is the most important. You got to have the most. It's like now we know that's not true. It's like, hey, fats and proteins are probably more important, depending on but generally speaking.
yeah.
But yeah, we have a tight niche community across the country. We have tons of clinics that do what we do. Definitely have some clinics in California that have a lot of the technologies that we have in our clinic, and they see patients, successfully and have successful results. So yeah, there's definitely clinics out there across the country that people are looking for help, and they're not in New Jersey, then you'll find help out there.
Uh,
Thank you so much, Jack. I am such a fan of you and the work that you do and your ability to encompass so many like advanced technologies and ancient techniques and care for people. And you have a great staff of people that are very loyal, that, follow your lead and become wiser just from being around you. And, you know, just, just thank you so much personally. You've helped me so much, but, for all of the people that you work with. And, like, I think you're kind of a magician, I
Mhm.
see you working and you just scan the room all the time, each person, where they're at, what they need. It's just amazing, and you're amazing. So thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Isabel. I appreciate it. Thanks for
Yeah,
your
we're
comments.
we're going to probably come back for another segment at some point on a different issue. I think shoulder,
Yeah.
shoulder and neck, from like I was talking to Dr. Larry and about tech neck, and the
Mhm.
problems that that's causing with, blood circulation flow and intercellular
Huge.
communication and all of that. I think that that's a big topic and can be visited again with you and your wisdom. So.
Yeah, we could
Uh,
definitely talk about that. A lot to talk about there for sure.
Yeah, so that's great. So thank you for your time today. And, from here, we always want to tell people to remember to be their own advocate.